Welcome. Here, we share accounts of near-death experiences. Before we dive into this narrative, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to receive notifications about new videos. Let's get to the experience. Hello, my name is Anna Stone, and I had a near-death experience on November 8, 2016. At that time, I was 38 years old. Prior to that, in my previous life, I was a research scientist working under a government contract, specifically for the Department of Defense and DARPA. Logically, I didn't see anything special about near-death experiences. I thought they were just mere legends, lacking scientific backing. Although I was drawn to topics like tarot and maybe even witchcraft when I was a child, I never fully embraced them. I flirted with these ideas but always found my way back to science. Despite having strange experiences in my childhood, some of which could be considered paranormal, I always managed to find a rational explanation. I was going through a very tough time in my life. I was drinking too much, not being my best self, and living in a toxic marriage. Then I started having bleeding episodes and didn't know what was happening. It felt like my menstrual cycle wouldn't stop, and I couldn't understand why. In fact, on the day it happened, I jokingly told my family that I was bleeding to death. The next moment I can recall, I'm in the hospital and being told that I passed out, apparently losing blood rapidly due to a ruptured ectopic pregnancy. At that point, I had already lost nearly half of my body's blood volume and started feeling a sensation that was hard to describe. It was extreme panic, the feeling that something was terribly wrong. It felt like I was going to explode. I felt all the cells in my body acting in a way that was anything but comfortable. When that feeling became unbearable, I simply wasn't in my body anymore. It was as if I was floating toward the ceiling like a balloon. I realized I was no longer in my body and could see myself. At that moment, I heard the sound of the machine emitting the cardiac arrest alarm. I watched the people in the room trying to revive me, but I felt no emotional connection to that scene. My only conscious thought at that moment was, well, this is it. The feeling was quite neutral, without any real emotional involvement. Then I realized that my sarcastic personality was still intact and that I was out of my body. It was intriguing, as I didn't know what to expect. After all, this shouldn't even be possible. I saw the doctors working on me and heard some comments that made me a little uneasy. One of the doctors referenced my history, mentioning a past dependence on medication, almost as if assuming I was just a junkie, even though I had been clean for 8 years. This left me quite offended, but I only recognized it when I returned to clarify. At one point, I heard the sound of the heart monitor, and my thoughts soon turned to my children. I wondered if they were okay, and, in an instant, I was taken to see my oldest daughter, who was 210 miles away, taking a college exam in Fresno. I watched her there, sitting at her desk, taking the test, and thought, okay, she's all right. Then I remembered my little one, and back in the hospital waiting room, I saw my Lucy, who was barely 2 at the time, playing with building blocks. I thought, okay, she's fine. Then, looking to my right, I realized I was in the hospital, but looking to my left, I was no longer in the hospital. I was in a place I can't quite describe, but it was clearly not Earth. The room had a yellowish, somewhat white hue. It felt like a room, even though I couldn't see any walls holding it up. I knew it was a room, but I didn't see any tunnels, no deceased relatives or religious figures. I was alone, but I didn't feel lonely. I sensed the presence of other things around me. First, I noticed that it was vast, with a renewed awareness and a clear sense of purpose. When I returned, my understanding of life and death had deepened. The seemingly brief experience had a lasting impact on how I viewed things. I realized that physical life was just a fraction of the truth, and that there was something much greater operating behind the reality we know. Over time, I was able to redirect my focus and attention. It was as if, in some way, I had received an inner guide, encouraging me to prioritize meaningful relationships and moments. This new understanding has allowed me to view everyday situations from a different perspective, transforming what once seemed trivial into something of immense importance. Life now held a new meaning, and I was determined to live it fully, knowing that love and connection were the keys to experiencing the true essence of existence. When I would rise and instantly wake up at the table, I knew exactly what had happened. I had died, and I had left my body. I was extremely troubled by this, as it shouldn't have happened. It wasn't something possible. It had to be just my neurons firing incorrectly while I was dying, and all of it must have been a hallucination. I started to question the staff. "Did you do this? Did you mention this in my medical records?" They were all stunned, stopping to attend to me and fill out a few forms. I was still connected to the monitor. There were no beeps to alert them that I was coming back. I guess it really surprised one of the men there. He looked quite restless, almost paralyzed. I asked the doctor again if he really had said that about me, and he questioned how I could have heard it. It was at that moment I realized it was genuine, that it wasn't hallucinations generated by the lack of oxygen in the brain. I expected them to affirm that it was all a hallucination due to hypoxia, but they confirmed the experience. It was then that I began to notice something serious had happened. I had died, and this was true. I asked the doctor how much time had passed since they declared the time of death, and he said it was only 6 minutes, not too long, but enough to transform various things in my life. The message I received from myself on the other side began to unfold into several other messages that also contributed to changing the course of my life. After being released from the hospital, I started to reflect on how I wasn't as concerned about my children as I should have been. I hadn't yet understood that on the other side, there are no negative emotions. I was blaming myself for not focusing on who would take care of them and what would happen later. Then I realized that this had already been planned. I had foreseen that I could stray a bit in life and that this was a kind of karmic reset. I returned with a strong desire to transform my existence. The first change I noticed was that I could no longer consume alcohol. Literally, I was physically unable to. Previously, I had used alcohol as an anesthetic for some unresolved internal issues. When I returned, I tried to have a beer, but I couldn't. It caused me physical discomfort. I found it impossible to swallow, as it turned into something warm and frothy in my mouth, completely losing its liquid essence. It was strange. My doctors had no explanation for this, but considered it a blessing. Thus, I ended my alcohol dependency in just 6 minutes. After that, things began to change quickly and significantly. Despite being involved in science, I felt directionless in life. Suddenly, I felt a strong desire to become a teacher. Within a few months, I got a job teaching young people facing difficulties, which turned out to be extremely rewarding and more aligned with what I truly should be doing. Additionally, I decided to follow my own advice given to the students and returned to college to finish my degree. I went back, completed my degree, got a master's, and I'm currently pursuing a second master's and a doctorate simultaneously in a new field of study, psychology and consciousness studies, completely different from the science I practiced before. My journey has focused on serving others, which has helped me cope with a difficult childhood. The event motivated me to seek healing and led me down a truly amazing and transformative path. Thank you for watching so far. Don't forget to leave a like so that this message can reach more people. If you wish to continue watching other experiences, click on one of the 2 videos that are now appearing on your screen.